Hello, and welcome to the Introduction to Oral History webinar. My name is Mark Peaver, Assistant Director of Technical Acquisitions and Finance.
And I'm Dr. Shirleene Robinson, and I'm a Director of Curatorial and Collection Research.
The National Library of Australia acknowledges Australia's First Nation peoples, the first Australians, as traditional owners and custodians of this land and gives respect to elders past and present, and through them all Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So today we're here and we're going to be talking about the library's amazing oral history collection, and we're going to do it by talking about four broad areas. What is oral history? How do we do oral histories in the library? How do we keep the oral histories in the library? And then finally, how do we access them? It is an amazing collection and we really look forward to sharing some of the work that we do here today. So first up, Shirleene, I guess one of the big questions with this is, what is oral history? Because there's lots of interview types in the world. What makes oral history so different to them?
Well, oral history is about people speaking about things that they have personal experience of. At the National Library, we use the whole of life interview method, which means although we have quite focused collections sometimes, could be people talking about things such as polio or the experiences of living through particular events. We like people to talk about their whole life. So because we don't know the type of questions that people might be looking to those interviews to answer later. The National Library's Oral History and Folklore collection really is quite extraordinary. It's a very rich collection. Today it is over 50,000 hours worth of recorded hours, which is quite special. So there really is something for everyone in that collection. It dates back to the 1950s, which makes it the oldest collection of oral history recordings and folklore recordings that were conducted in this country. And it really can trace its origins back to two quite remarkable people. So Hazel de Burgh was a truly original woman who has been regarded as Australia's first oral historian. So she started to do interviews with people who were quite famous writers. It was how she sort of began. And those interviews evolved from her asking writers to read from their books. And while she had these incredible people in front of her, people like Mary Gilmore, she took that opportunity to ask them questions about their lives and so on. So she did this for about 30 years, which is a really amazing span of time. And probably around 1,300 interviews were conducted by her over this time period. The folklore collection it traces its origins back to a gentleman called John Meredith, who was really keen from the 1950s onwards to capture the vernacular culture of Australian life. So he did a lot of trips where he recorded the voices of people who could speak to that vernacular culture, and music as well. And today our folklore collection has evolved to include multicultural collecting. We're very keen to make sure that multicultural heritage of Australia is also reflected in the folk collection. So together you have this really dynamic and alive collection that provides a really rich insight into Australian culture and life in a way that really complements other types of collection material. I think there's something really special about being able to listen to the recorded voice. It's quite an intimate way of connecting with somebody's story. And the great thing about oral history, I think, is that we have the voices of very eminent Australians, prime ministers and people who are very famous for their achievements in our collection, but there are also the voices of people who perhaps might not be as well known, and oral history gives them the opportunity to speak and to have their voices heard.
That's amazing. Are there any particular sort of collections of those, ones with the voices who are not normally heard? Because that is an amazing way to get the message across, because you're right, with these eminent people, they're normally written about in many other areas, but there's some groups of people in our society which normally will not get the opportunity to have their voices heard.
Yeah, I think that is a really excellent question, and I think that there's a number of collections that come to mind, and I think that there might be many people who've heard of the extraordinary rich Bringing Them Home oral history collection, which comprises of about 340 interviews with people who either were members of the stolen generations or who were involved in removing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their family groups, and that's an example of a collection where people speak very directly to a part of Australian history which is quite difficult history, but it is such valuable and vital history. And I think it really does show what the unique and special nature of oral history is.
That's great. So in terms of that, like given that, we've got so many things to collect, how do we actually go about collecting oral history here in the library? Are there any sort of things that you need to consider when you're, thinking about what do we record next?
I think that we always want the collection to reflect what's happening in Australian society, and we want it to be a record that will be really useful to people in the future, in 100 years' time, in 200 years' time. So while we today can listen to voices that were recorded in the 1950s and 1960s to answer all sorts of questions, we want people in the future to be able to do the same thing. So in terms of the oral history program at the National Library, we actively commission our own oral histories each year, and we have interviewers who do interviews all across the country, and each year they're building on that extraordinary collection of over 50,000 hours. So, there's a lot of events that are currently unfolding in Australia that we would like the collection to document. In the future, certainly there will be collections that will talk about COVID, which is something that we're all living through at the moment, just as we have collections that, as I mentioned, talk about things like polio, that talk about what it was like to live through the influenza pandemic that happened in the aftermath of World War I. So it's always about thinking about what's happening in society and making sure that's documented, and that it reflects the full diversity of Australian society as well, and perhaps those voices that haven't always been heard.
That's amazing that oral history is such an important way to get people to tell their stories in a much more personal and intimate way. And given that these oral histories are so personal, what are some of the things that the library does in order to safeguard how those histories are used going forward?
I think that's a really important question because, we're really proud to hold the types of collections that we hold, and something that is really important to us all is making sure that we look after the material that we collect in a way that accords with the wishes of the people who have been recorded. So sometimes that might mean that we've conducted oral histories which are not available during the lifetime of the person who's been recorded, because we would much rather that they feel comfortable sharing their full story in the way that they want to share it, knowing that it won't be released without their permission. So that's certainly an option available to them. So we do have an extraordinary collection, and a great proportion of it is available online, but there is material that we do have which we won't make available online until we have that permission from the person who was recorded.
That's great. Yeah. And also in terms of the collections, are we just taking in new recordings now, or is there another way of us that we're collecting things as well?
Yeah, I think that overall we certainly rely very heavily on our commissioned original program of oral histories. So, at least 90%, I would say, of what we bring in is originally commissioned material. But occasionally there can be material that has been recorded by someone else, someone who wasn't involved with the library. Perhaps in a previous decade, it could be material that was really rare, recorded, say, in the 1960s in a remote community. And if that material exists and it's appropriate potentially for it to come to the library and it's of national significance, then we will take in that material, which we call formed collections. So it's a smaller part of what we do, but it is a part of the collecting plan of the National Library's oral history program. We've talked a little bit about how the collection dates back to the 1950s, and obviously when people recorded sounds back then, they couldn't do it in the way we would now with a fully digitised collection. I think there's something that's really quite amazing about the material that we hold, all that 50,000 hours, is that it is a fully digitised collection. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. The library is very fortunate to be one of the few institutions in the world to say that, we have a fully digitised collection. And it's thanks to the efforts of people going back, well over a couple of decades to ensure that the recordings that were taken in by the library are able to be fully preserved and fully digitised. We completed a 15-year preservation plan back in 2018, which means all of the collection's preserved, and we're actually adding to it at the rate of 1,200 hours per year, thanks to the commissioning programs that the library does. The way that we go about doing that is through a very amazing setup here. We have world standard preservation suites that are able to preserve many different types of formats. Because we're dealing with unique recordings, we're able to go through and play back lots of magnetic playback recordings. So things like reel-to-reel tape, cassettes. Digital audio tape was a format that was used by journalists in the late 80s, early 90s, and some CD recordings. Along with all that, we are also very capably taking on all these new born digital types of recordings, which we collect through our 30 field recording kits, which are broadcast standard, as well as our own recording studio. So we're actually sitting in the studio now, and so the microphones that you hear are the same microphones that we use when we're recording people as part of our collection. We also have fantastic multi-track recording facilities. So we each year we have a number of performers coming through and contributing to the collection, and we're able to make fantastic recordings using those methods too. Yep, so it's really, really cool.
No, I think that it's an exciting program, and I think one of the great things is that technology allows us to record, as you say, everywhere from where we are now at the National Library in this studio, all the way to remote communities, parts of Australia that can be sometimes quite difficult to get to if you're travelling from major cities, because we do want to make sure that the collection is carrying all those voices, and that we can record anyone wherever they may be in Australia, and that's a challenge that we really love, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's really good. So in terms of that, I guess the next thing to look at is how do we access these recordings. So again, we are also very fortunate to have a number of great ways for you to be able to access the collection. The first way is to just go straight into our catalogue, and if you type in a search term and just limit the results to audio, you'll be presented with a list of all the things that are available in the oral history collection. And what's even more amazing is that if you see a blue button there called Listen Online, you can click on that, and that will take you to our audio player. And the audio player is an amazing thing because it plays audio, as you'd expect, but also we sometimes provide time-coded transcripts and summaries, which enable you to do really amazing things like word searching. And you can also access it through Trove as well. The cool thing about Trove is that you do have a little bit more functionality in that you can actually search for certain words within Trove, which may not be in the catalogue record, and they'll also come up as a hit, which will take you to the interview and allow you to play it back as well. That's going to be something I'm going to show you a little bit more in a sec when I actually show you the screen when I do that.
I think that's something that's quite extraordinary about the National Library's collection of oral history and folklore material is that it is a fully digitised collection, and I'd like it if you could maybe speak a little bit about why that really matters and why that's so significant.
No, thanks, Shirleene. Yeah, digitisation is incredibly important. The whole thing about audio is that you can't touch it, you can't see it, you only hear it, and it's really important that especially with some of these carriers, the legacy carriers that we have now, they're impossible to play directly. You can't buy the machines new anymore, and so in order for people to actually listen to them, the preservation is the access. You need to preserve them in order to hear them. So we regard digital preservation as very basically essential in order to be able to access these things. What we do is we apply international standards in order to transfer the material, and what we do is we have a very highly calibrated system of playback and recording, which means that when we record things, they're recorded as what we call warts and all. So when you're listening to something, it's as if you're listening to the original recording. We don't do any editing here because we want to keep this as a true document. And we also then apply a few things to it in order to make it in what we call a master file, which contains a few descriptive elements. So we embed certain information like the title, but also technical information in there. And also create a whole set of access copies and MP3 files. So when you're accessing them at home, you'll be listening to an MP3 file that was created as part of our preservation process. But just because we've preserved it as a digital file and stored it safely on our mass storage doesn't mean we throw the original away. And we are very fortunate to have these fantastic climate-controlled tape stores where we keep those originals in perpetuity because we just never know when there may be another opportunity that we could play them back again with even better quality.
And speaking about the oral history and folklore collection, is there something that you have that is a particular favourite?
There's a lot to choose from here, but I think one of the great things is I think as a collection, the Hazel de Burgh collection would have to be one of my favourites because she was able to a woman who had so much forethought to be able to record people talking about their lives, that she basically gave birth to oral history in Australia. And we're so lucky to have her original recorder here, this beautiful Nova tape recorder, which weighs about 2 tonne, is made out of wood, and is so battered, yet she was able to extract every possible bit of sonic information out of that machine, which means the recordings that she did in the late 50s are amazingly good in terms of quality.
And there's people that she recorded where the library holds the only copy of their voice, which is, I think, really quite special. For me, from that collection, I'm thinking about somebody like May Gibbs, who many of you might know, for her beautiful work around gumnut babies. And to think that she was recorded very late in life by Hazel de Burgh and through Hazel de Burgh's persistence. So it is full of, gems like that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's right. And what about you? What's your favourite?
I think that it evolves all the time, and I think that's the extraordinary thing about the collection, that you can dip into this wonderful, as I said, over 50,000 hours, and discover new things all the time. But some collections that I've enjoyed or think are really rich, since I've been really exposed to it, include things like the Australian Response to AIDS collection of oral history interviews, because that was the first oral history collection in the world to be conducted at the height of the HIV and AIDS epidemic, where it really gave a voice to people who were quite heavily stigmatised at that time. So we have these really special and unique oral histories as part of that collection. I tend to really like the unique voices, maybe the voices that are from people that people may not have heard of. So it could be a miner from Broken Hill. It could be, somebody who can, as I said earlier, talk about what it was like to live through the First World War, Second World War, somebody who might have served in Vietnam. I think that it's the everyday stories that make up our collection and make it so special. And I think something that I know we both enjoy, because we've spoken about this, is when we can reconnect people to the voices of people that they might know or perhaps are descended from who might be in our collection. And that does happen, where we will hold an interview with somebody's grandparent or even great-grandparent, and we can make it available to them. And to hear that joy and their delight in hearing somebody that's very special to them speak in that very intimate, personal way about their life, I think that is just one of the great things about the collection.
Absolutely, yeah. We always feel that the oral histories, when people give an oral history, they're actually giving a piece of themselves to the collection, and you can really hear it. So we really fully encourage you to have a listen to our oral history collection, because you'll hear the emotion, you'll hear the pauses, the hesitations, and you're hearing real people talk about their life stories. So thank you very much, Shirleene, for your time today. And thank you very much for your time as well. So thank you so much for watching, and we hope that you can watch the next section. Hi everyone, it's Mark again, and what I'm going to do is just lead you through how to find the library's oral history interviews on the internet. You can see here we're just at the starting page of a search engine, and we'll just go straight now to the library's catalogue. Okay, just bring up the library's homepage there. And we're just going to scroll down slightly to get to our catalogue. You can start typing in here, or what I'm going to do is just click on the catalogue button on the right. And because I'm really interested in finding audio material, I'm going to click on Advanced Search and just scroll down to Add Limits and then click on Audio. Click Find. So what that's done is now returned a list of all the things in our collection which are audio. And you can see here we've got over 22,000 items to choose from. And we can sort these in a variety of different ways, by their date or author or title. And that's great. And the good thing is that on the right, there's also some really interesting information here that can help us sort by the author, which in this case is the main interviewer. So Hazel de Burgh's name is mentioned, John Meredith is there, or by subject area, and we can expand these. So we've got folk music or politicians, painters, and politicians, a bit of thing about journalists there. or by series. And the oral history collection actually has a number of different series associated with it. And so if you happen to find that there's a particular project that you're interested in, you can use the series title to help you find some more information there as well. What I'm really interested in though is not just looking at what's in our catalogue, but I want to see what I can listen to online, because what's amazing about our collection is, although it's over 50,000 hours, it's actually more like 55,000 hours, a quarter of it is actually available online right now for free. So 13,750 hours is available for you to listen to right now. And the way we're going to find it is, if you see down here on e-resources, if we click on NLA digital material, all of a sudden that brings up a whole bunch of names which have this beautiful blue listen online button. And from that we can actually click on any one of these and listen to them straight away. And you know, there might be some people there that you're interested in listening to, so you can, straight after our webinar today, feel free to jump on and have a look. There's one in particular that I'm going to play though, because it's a really great demonstration of the power of our system. And what I'm going to do is type in Florey. So Sir Howard Florey was one of the inventors or discoverers of penicillin. And we have what we believe is one of the only existing recordings of his voice in the world. And you can see here that Howard was recorded as part of the Hazeldenberg collection back on the 5th of April 1967. There's a big blue button there, so what we'll do is click on that button, and that will take us to the Trove audio player. There's an end user license agreement which you can read, just telling you what you can and can't do with the audio. And if you're happy with that, click I accept. Okay, so here we are, and we've got the screen, and there's quite a bit of information to look at here. On the left we have some information that's been ported over from the catalogue record, being the title and a little bit of a summary. We can also bounce right back to the catalogue record by clicking on that link, as well as some information about the holdings and some things there. For those of you who've listened to audio online before, you've got similar sorts of buttons that you might have seen, a bit of a play button, stop button, volume control. And there's nothing to stop us now. We can just press play and just start listening to it.
Yes, good. This is Howard Walter Florey, and I was born in Adelaide at the turn of the century, or just before. I've been asked to say something about my young days. I look back on them with great pleasure.
Oh, that's good, see? So, and there again, you know, just an example of how, you know, the amazing quality that we can get from something that's now over 50 years old. So we can just press play and just listen to it, similar to a podcast or anything like that. So it's a great way to listen to some fantastic stories. But you might have also seen here we've got two sections being transcript and summary. With the transcript, this is actually a verbatim transcript of what Howard says. So if you like, you can actually skim through and see what he's said. And so if you do find something very interesting, so for example, there he talks about his first interest was chemistry, we can actually go straight to that point by clicking on the play button here.
Now, the first interest was chemistry. I was not very good at mathematics, no good at all.
Yes, I think we can all relate to that. So you can do that. Or similarly, if one interesting way to also analyse a recording is to use the online summary if it's available. And down here, we've had someone go through and carefully listen to Howard's interview and pick up keywords, themes, which is really amazing because sometimes this enables you to look at recording in a very different way. It means that you can actually, because there'll be keywords or phrases which may not have actually been mentioned in the interview but are incredibly important. So from a research point of view, if you're kind of looking across a number of different interviews, this enables you to group things together that initially on the face of it may not be that related. And again, just like the transcript upstairs, we can just click straight to that and it will take you to the position there.
Well, it's not altogether uninteresting that my successor in the chair of pathology at Oxford is an Australian.
Okay. With Howard's interview, there are a number of sessions, so sometimes interviews only go for a single session, but here we can see that he went for 3 sessions, so session 1, session 2, session 3, and again we've got scrolling bars there that we can look at for all those recordings. We can also synchronise the recordings. So at the moment the sync is on. So as the recording plays, you'll see the transcript and the summary sort of gently bounce down to keep up to speed. Or we can turn that feature off as well if we wish. What we can also do though, which is really exciting, is that if you are using these interviews for research purposes, it's possible to cite the section of the audio. So if I click, so say for example, we're very interested in a hospital in those days, because I'm doing a research project on hospitals, I can click on this link, and what it will do is generate 2 web links for you that you can cut and paste directly into any document. So this one, for example, will actually play the interview from that particular point. Or if you'd like to play just the paragraph that's there, then you can just click on that one there, and that will take you to those points there in a completely different thing. Okay, so what we can also do though, which I think is really amazing, is we can word search within the audio. So we do know that Sir Howard Florey was the inventor of penicillin, so we're very interested in finding out where he speaks about those things. And typing this word in here, we have fully time-coded transcripts and summaries, and so straight away we can go straight to a section where he talks about penicillin.
Then I'd only been there 4 years, and the chance came to move to Oxford. And I stayed there as a professor for, 27 years. And things went fairly well one way and another. We had a bit of luck with penicillin, a great deal of luck in that.
Yep, so that's great. And again, I can cite that audio and paste that into my research. And it's a really powerful search engine. It's I don't think there's too many players, if any, that are like that around the world that are able to do with oral histories what we can do here. So just before we leave this page, we can also download these items. So we can go to the download page. So should you wish to listen to the audio in a different way, you can actually download the files there, or bring up a PDF or plain text version of the summary and transcript as well. Okay, so that's looking at it through the catalogue. What I might do now is show you a bit of added extra functionality that can be searched through when we go through Trove. Okay, so we're now on the Trove homepage, and Trove is an amazing search portal because it groups together so many records. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a trick where I'm just going to type in a term called nla.obj, and what that's going to do is limit my search term to things within the library, because digital objects within the library all have this little prefix there. Now, the interesting thing about the catalogue record to do with Sir Howard Florey's interview is that it talks about a lot of different things, but what it doesn't mention is a thing called lysozyme. And the lysozyme was a very important component of part of his research. And because I'm very interested in this term, I want to type it in. But it's not in the catalogue record. But what's really interesting is that it's actually embedded within the time-coded transcript and summary of the interview. So what I've done here is just put together a little term, nla.obj lysozyme, press enter. It's going to bring up a lot of different things to do with lysozyme, but if I go across the top to music, audio and video, I can see here that's brought back one hit, being the fantastic interview we've just been listening to. I'll click on that interview and I can see a couple of things there. Listen, listen. Brings up our player. Now if I type in lysozyme again, all of a sudden I'm where he starts talking about that. I can go straight to that section.
But in the laboratory at that time, we were working on an antibacterial substance named lysozyme.
So what's really powerful is that all of a sudden we've gone way beyond the catalogue record now, straight to the actual transcript and summary. So it's a really great way to find exactly what you're after really quickly. And that concludes my demonstration of searching and finding the library's amazing collection of oral histories online. You'll have no shortage of things to listen to, with over 13,750 hours available. I thoroughly encourage you to go online and have a listen right now.